Right, no, 10 worldwide, yes, that much I've gotten. Right, so how do you? Well, okay, I know they have to wear uniforms. I know they gotta get that. I would that much. I mean, I'd love a Robinette, which is up in Corvallis, and that's a single site, but I don't know how. Oh, it's time.
Marcus on his way. to
Oh,
Public Forum.
okay,
So Marcus will start and we'll have the rest of the motion.
okay, all right.
I'm gonna take the floor to get it going.
And do I have, no, yes, I have this. Luck. No, I don't know which is which. I better pay attention.
May have left you.
I know, I started.
You think they're the same? Yes? Oh, thank heavens.
That's mine.
Do I need another one? No, I don't think so. I don't even know which one I'm supposed to use. Go ahead and call it to order. Okay. I'll call the city council meeting to order. This meeting will be in person and through Zoom. To participate by Zoom, you will need to pre-registered by 3 p.m. today. If you have any questions, you should contact the city recorder, Sammy Egbert. So right now, we're starting on the special council meeting, July 26th of 2022. And I'm calling this to order at 6:05. And this meeting is being recorded and live streamed, as I just said. The meeting will include participants in person as well as by Zoom video. There is an opportunity for the public to provide testimony if you're signed up during citizen testimony and again during the public hearing. Point, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. And Councilor Blaine, did you read that? Sure.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands.
Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sammy, do you have a pen you could throw away?
I do.
Sammy, would you like to do a roll call for us, please?
Mayor Smith is absent. Counselor Fox, absent. Marcus Alexander is present. Counselor Bell, Counselor Blaine, Counselor McConnell are present, and Counselor Lehman is joining us by Zoom. There is a quorum.
Thank you. Agenda review, Tammy?
You guys have your red folders there. There's quite a bit of information in there. First item tonight, our ordinance A200L is being moved to the end of the agenda. We have a public hearing on that was noticed for 7 o'clock. We are starting this meeting at 6, so in order to stay in compliance, do that one last. You should have a document with proposed amendments for the matrix. You guys see that? It says attachment A. So that will go with agenda item number 1. Then you'll have the big thick packet is attachment H, excuse me, That's the Coburg zoning code in legislative format with the proposed changes in it. That also goes with the agenda item 1 that's going at the end of the meeting. The next thing is we're adding an item at 2.5. It's the Roberts Court contract with Riverbend Construction Company. This will be presented under council action items.
At this point, we'll do citizens testimony. Sammy, is there anyone signed up? No. There's no one signed up, so moving on. Get my pages turned here. Consent. First, you may remove an item prior to the meeting, or you can make Scribner changes at this time. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. I think I hear none. Do I hear none? None? Okay. Counselor Lehman, do you have anything to add? No? So at this point, I would accept a motion to accept.
There's no consent agenda, so
Okay.
you can just move.
So now just keep moving on. I apologize for that.
So just the red stuff is the script.
Right.
Everything else is built
Okay.
in behind. Thanks.
So council will now conduct the second reading of ordinance A 254, an ordinance declaring a temporary ban on psilocybin service centers and the manufacture of psilocybin products. First reading and public hearing on this ordinance was held on July 12th, 2022. Council, you can address any questions to Ann Heath. Are there any questions from council?
So the council gave staff direction to bring back this ordinance as it is written. This is a temporary ban. As we discussed at the last meeting, the state of Oregon hasn't completely decided on their guidelines of how this will take place and who could be licensed. It's just not very clear yet. And so the council elected to have us bring back a temporary ban, which is a 2-year ban. It would sunset in December of 24. And automatically, and I believe if Ann Davies can help me out, if at that time the council wanted to ban it, then they could move to ban.
They would have to put it in front of the voters.
They would, so then you could go back to the voters again. So it's basically a time to see how this all pans out as far as how the state will manage it. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just have one question regarding process moving forward at the end of the 2-year ban, and we're looking at what our next steps are. Will we have opportunity to have people who are expert in the field, I guess you would say, come in and talk to us about it at all?
I'm sure that as time goes on, there's going to be much more information comes out, and there will be people who have more information, and certainly we can bring people in when you get to the time when you're having to make a decision what you would do. That there will be more information that can come forward, however you wish to receive it.
Any other questions? So just to be clear, what we're dealing with tonight is following up on the first reading. This is the second reading, and what we at our last council meeting asked staff to do was to put forth a motion that would allow us to do a moratorium, a temporary ban until we had more information back from the state about what this is going to look like. This would not be, we wouldn't be having psilocybin shops set up somewhere. This is only given under controlled clinical circumstances.
Right.
So what we're talking about now, and then this, based on our vote tonight, then this would go to the voters, go on the ballot and go to the voters in November, so that the voters and the community members at that point have another option to voice their point of view.
Absolutely. Sample ballot
Yes.
attached.
All that.
Do not vote for it. Then
Or the ban.
for the ban, then
Yes.
it just becomes legal
Yes,
as of
That's-
January 1st.
that's the way I read it too.
Yep.
So I think we may need to do some public education in terms of what this, what
Right.
they're voting on. There are no further discussion or questions of Ms. Heath. I would entertain a motion and a second.
Wait.
Oh,
Okay, but there's no comment. There's no one waiting. Okay,
No.
just want to make sure.
no. So we'll go ahead with, and second,
I move to adopt ordinance A 254, an ordinance declaring a temporary ban on psilocybin service centers and the manufacture of psilocybin products.
A second.
are there any opposed? All in favor, raise your hands.
Aye.
And passes.
I abstain.
It's noted. Thank you.
Counselor Fox, if you need more information, I'm happy to.
We're going to. Robert's Court, right, okay, so we have we're going to be discussing the Roberts Court pavement project, and we have a staff report by Brian Harmon. I can do it. And in this instance, we're going to have a staff report by Ann Heath.
I bet you Brian will be here at 7 o'clock.
Yes, probably.
Yes. So this is
Thank
the
you, Anna.
next project in our list of projects taking place. It's an extension of the Roberts Road project that you already approved. And this one is for Roberts Court. We put it out to bid. We had 2 bidders come in. And the bid was within the vicinity of where our engineers thought it would be. This does qualify for the OTIB funding that we've already applied for and been awarded. And so it's in the amount of $379,000. The engineer and the attorney have reviewed the contract. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the Roberts Court project. Yes, sir.
Just curious, 2 bids, was that expected that it would be low or? Seems like we get more bids.
Bids are really tough right now. Companies are really busy. Lots of transportation dollars out there. But we were happy with the bids we received, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Sir.
We're still only on 1-year warranty.
Yeah, that's the
Standard.
standard street. It gives us a chance to
see if anything's happening immediately or shortly after the street is completed. Brian watches that stuff pretty good. Yeah, he follows through.
Have we had issues in the past with a short, 1 year is a short warranty, it seems to me.
There's been a few projects, one specific lately. I wouldn't say it was outside of the contract, but on Coleman Street, when it was completed by the contractor, we had some punch items that we wanted them to go back and redo, and they did. I believe when we did the first section of Roberts Road, a couple of years ago, we went back and had them fix a few things. So it's not unusual to go through a punch list of items and ask them to repair some things.
And we do that within a year. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty standard
Yeah.
length of time
Yeah.
for this area.
Yeah.
Further council discussion? Questions? No? Mr. Lehman, any questions from you? No? Okay. Well, at this time, we can gain a motion and a second.
Move to approve the Roberts Road, Roberts Court paving project contract between the city of Coburg and Riverbend Construction Company.
You, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? No. So the motion passes on the paving project. I have to make notes periodically here, so. We're going to be looking at the IOOF lease agreement. They have requested, and Ms. Heath, you're on again.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we did, back in 21, approve a lease of the IOOF building. Recently, on July 18th, I received a phone call and then a written letter, which is in your packet, from the IOOF asking to lease back or to have back half of their parking lot. And they want the front half of the parking lot near the street as but a food truck in that area. So we did work with them to amend the lease and worked with the city attorney to provide alternative lease language, which is at the back of the packet. There's a change, marked changes in the lease. It basically just says that they wish to trade the difference in the cost of the lease. They will take back the upkeep of the outside of the building and the grounds for the front half of the parking lot. Since this discussion and after the, we had an instance that I want the council that might change your mind on what you want to do with this lease. So there was an event in the town last weekend, and on Friday, the person who was managing the event had arranged for a food vendor to be in the alley or in the parking lot. Not exactly where the food vendor was supposed to set up, but they came in, set up before anybody grabbed them and said, hey, that's not where you're supposed to be. When I noticed them there, I talked to the staff first, and I went and I called the person promoting and said, hey, this vendor's in this spot. They cannot be there. It's not safe. They were in their point of sale in a place that was unsafe. So I said, we're going to have to work out something different. In the meantime, IOOF called me and said, I want those people in our parking lot. I don't want them. I don't want you allowing this to take place in the parking lot. I reminded them that we have a lease on the parking lot.
And we cannot be subjective or pick and choose, be allowed to use the parking lot. It's a public parking lot. And so I worked with the vendor to move over to, so that their point of sale was on the sidewalk, so people could stand on the sidewalk and order food. We worked out everything. They plugged their electricity into the building or into the power pole. And in the night, the power was shut off and a lock was put on the power. And so Brian called me on Saturday and said, what should I do? And I just encouraged him to not cut the lock. We don't need to fuel the fire right now. Let's find an alternative way for hooking up power for this vendor. So he did that. They want us to have the back side of the parking lot only, which gives us about maybe 10 spots. And it's not going to be easy for people to see that that's where there is parking. That's just the reality of it. We can put more parking signs up. But my concern is that I cannot, every single time we have an event, that we allow someone to be in that parking lot that this particular group doesn't like, disallow that. So it caused a lot of stress and a lot of work on our staff on Friday, working through this issue. And we can't do it every time we have an event here. And we can't pick and choose who we allow because it's public. We can get ourselves in trouble. And I explained this to the leaser, that we're not in the position to do that. So I've given a lot of thought to this, and this is up to the council, but it all seems to be not focused on who uses the building or what's going on inside the building, but more of who uses the parking lot. So there's a concern that if a particular person sets up a new business where the Morellos was, that they don't want that business using that parking lot. And it's like, we can't do that. This is public parking. So we're not going to sit there and babysit the parking lot. So I am putting this to council because I hope you have a discussion about this, but I would suggest that perhaps the city doesn't want to lease the parking lot at all and leave it out of the lease, because it creates more work for the staff trying to decipher what happens in that parking lot. And I foresee us that not stopping. There's players that the city just doesn't need to get in the middle of it, but it causes issues that the staff has to solve. And so just want you to have that information as you're thinking about this lease moving forward, because I'm not sure that it's worth the amount of parking spaces that we're going to get with the change in lease to put up with us always having to have interference with who we allow to use the space. So
Can I clarify? So right now, the parking lot is included in our lease.
yes, yeah.
What they're asking is to take back that front part,
The front half.
to be able to put their own food cart there or someone of their choosing.
Or rent it to a food cart.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I guess I'm wondering if the parking lot was is ours at this point, and we had approved the vendor to be there, why did they think that they could? Yeah.
They had voiced to me in the past that they never wanted this specific person to ever utilize the
Oh.
parking lot. And I've explained it in the past that we cannot do that. We can't pick and choose who is in the parking lot.
There's ancient bad blood. If you remember the chain link fence that went up between to Morello's
You,
so,
I see.
and dead ends.
So that's what you're saying. This is a real personal issue. So if we continue to lease that whole parking lot, then this is likely to continue anyway?
I would think so. I don't see it ending, so.
So what is their jurisdiction to shut off the electricity? I mean, how can they do
They,
that?
well, they said that they paid the power bill, and that they did not want this vendor using the power to the building.
Yeah,
And
but there's a lease.
there's a
that we're
lease.
Following, so they've broken that, they violated that lease.
What
Yeah.
did our lawyer say
Yeah,
about that?
that's what I'd like to know.
Where is she?
Left at the opportune time.
Attorney.
You can't step out.
So
of the
our city
owl,
attorney,
apparently.
this is kind of new and I haven't had a chance to discuss it
Yeah.
with her too much. And so they're asking if we have the lease on the IOOF and they're in breach of lease.
So it's their building,
Right.
we're renting space in the building, we're renting the parking lot. They want some of the parking lot back. So what's their breach?
As far as shutting off the electricity.
Oh,
generally.
okay.
They violated that lease, didn't they?
So but we don't wanna.
Well, I just want the question answered.
What's the question?
Okay. And on the area that we were renting, using the electricity that's in the lease, and they decided to shut off the electricity.
Does the lease say anything about that we have access to the letter? As part of that?
Well, we have access to the parking lot in the downstairs of the building. So I'm assuming that that means we have electricity. So, I mean, that's just part of leasing the building is that you're gonna have the utility. And
Electricity
yes,
in the building.
utilities are in here. And it actually says that the city will pay the power bill in the lease. So, well, that's a question that I have out there is, did the power get switched? And are we paying it? I think we are.
Because
So,
they're saying they pay the price.
right, they're saying they pay the power. So, and there's a question about whether or not that was hooked up to is in the same power bill. Is it a separate bill? So these are things that, one of the things the city has to do is clarify where are the power poles around town that the spider boxes can hook to, because we have spider boxes and during events, we plug them into these poles. And so we need to clarify which are ones that are going to be available during an event and which ones we can't hook up to. And so that's a clarification we have to do as a city. But I still do not think that shutting off the power and locking it when we have a vendor in the parking lot was, it was kind of not.
I think
That's
it is
very
a city
nice.
something.
There should be provision. I mean, I've looked at the lease, but I don't remember how it's structured, but there should be something in the lease that allows us to give them notice about think that something's being breached, you give them notice and say, cease and desist or whatever.
Right.
Which we could certainly.
Well, and if you choose to change in what they're requesting, you could say that they can't shut off the power. If we're using the building and they don't like it's being rented to, they cannot shut off the power to the building. They can't do shut offs without notice.
Question about the parking spots that they want back. Do we have to negotiate back with them, or can we say, no, this is what is in the lease? And we don't have to do anything different?
That's a choice, is the council can say, no, we leased it and we don't wish to change the lease at this time. They can say, okay, then we're going to cancel the lease and then we don't have the building.
Can they terminate at will?
I think so.
In the back.
I was saying, is there a clause or is it just? 30
Yes,
days?
there is a clause. That's one of the things we cleared up is that I had added to the change in lease was that there had to be, because they gave me this last week. And so one of the things we were adding to the new language was you have to give us 60 days notice if you're going to want to change a lease. You can't drop it on us and expect the council to hear it within a week. That's not really very fair. Because staff doesn't have enough time to really discuss it.
What
too
is
much.
in the lease about?
So that's what I'm in
The
your
item
packet.
in your
and
packet.
that's what I'm trying to
Under
find the
tab two.
page number so I can draw you to it. Yeah, I'm looking. Just a second.
We don't have this memorized yet, do we? Doggone it.
Yeah, it's just default in covenants. It's a default on us that
What page is that, Ann?
it's on 76.
Thank you.
There's a default in covenant on the leasee that if we don't fulfill our obligation, they can provide us 20 days notice. So the nature of default. But
How many years is this lease?
Says, May 2023.
it is
Okay.
only a year, I believe. Yeah.
That lease, they have clause of term. So I have a question.
Okay, I'm gonna try to
When you
answer.
were negotiating this lease, they mentioned, they didn't want anything to do with the vendor across the street?
Yes, and we told them we would not be able to go into a lease and promise that we could pick and choose who we would allow use the building. It was made very clear to them at that time.
That didn't phase them, or they didn't have any objections?
They just made it clear that they weren't, they went ahead and went forward with it, but they weren't supportive of having a certain group of people in town rent their parking.
We have set plans for this all.
Is being served, is being utilized as a community center, so it's valuable to the community. The community holds, there was a quilt show in there this weekend. There's funerals, there's birthday parties, there's community events. Most of the time during events, it's being used now, where before there wasn't an indoor. And so it was part of a community asset. What was gonna happen is they were facing that the building could get locked up because they just didn't have the capacity to manage the building. And so the city would lose the asset. And that was why we moved to lease the building as a community asset.
We're having
I have a few thoughts on this.
Counselor Lyman,
Am I muted or can you hear me?
hear you.
We can hear.
Okay, just a few thoughts I have. I'm assuming that this is more of a personal issue between the parties. I hope it's not some breach of protected class or discrimination that would fall under those categories. I would tend to deny their request and stick with the lease. If they choose to terminate the lease under the agreement terms to terminate it, that's fine. I'm a little concerned about the message we would send that we're just kind of walking away from this issue. I'd rather stand up and say, you know, this is public parking. Anyone can use it. If you choose not to renew the lease with us, that's fine. That's your prerogative. Rather than say, we still want to keep the lease and the property and avoid the issue and the question that they're raising.
Counselor Fox?
Well, I totally agree with most of that, except for I don't want to avoid the issue, because it sounds like it could be an ongoing battle in the future, since you might want to rent out the space again and be to the wrong party, possibly, and if it's the right party, and they don't lock out the electricity, what message is that sending? Because one time, so this is.
I agree with. Sir,
Yeah, I did find the section 8 talks about utilities and service, and I know that you're going to double check this, but it does say that the leasee pays electric service, natural gas service, water, sewer, refuse collection. So
We're
and
paying.
as
the
far as
water
we
bill.
know, we are doing all that, and I know
Yeah.
that you were going to double check.
Yep.
It's moot for right now, because they're saying they pay the thing and we don't have our answers all lined up.
Well, it's. If they, you know, and the other part that we said is if you pay it. And there's an expense accrued over the weekend that it's gonna cost you money, then we can have the vendor reimburse you. I mean, we can do that. That's part of our whole follow-up to events that the city can say, okay, you use this person's electricity and it costs this much, so you need to pay them back. And the manager of the event that was taking place actually agreed to do that. So I don't, it's just a sticky situation, and I didn't want you to look at this and not have the latest information on kind of what's happening with this.
This information is old information, actually.
For some of you, perhaps. So our options at this point would seem to be either approving or denying their request. Or, and I'll look at legal counsel also. Could we push this off until we have more information, or?
I mean, that's an option. That's kind of a practical. Not something I can answer. for you,
Right.
but-
Like a Dodge.
Well, it is like a dodge, but I
But
guess.
it's not, we don't have all the information we need, so. If I could just speak, I
Absolutely.
agree with what you have said. But I still think we need more information before we can move forward and have reasonable and legal.
personally don't think we should be held hostage by a leaseor. We've signed a lease, we've stuck to our lease. They broke that lease. That's as simple as it is. So I'm not coming with this leaseor at all, so I would not approve it.
I agree with that.
Okay, so
If we were to have community events, you need community parking, and we cut it. Put a chain link fence up.
So the bottom line is, and I agree, I totally agree with you. I'm just wondering what the consequences are at this time. We put how much money into the building if they, I mean, if they consider that we've broken the lease, it looks like to me
We didn't break the
they
lease.
broke the lease.
It would have to break the lease.
Yeah.
We're just holding to the lease.
We're holding to the, you're saying you do not wish to change the lease. You want to hold to the lease as it is written. And if they want to break the lease, that's up to them.
but the term
So-
of the lease goes until June of 2023.
Right, yeah.
So,
Sure how that, I'm assuming, Ann, that if they were to file to break the lease, that they would have to return to us the rents that we've paid, the lease payments that we've paid, so,
have to really take a look at that.
Yeah.
and see what Yeah.
yeah.
the default provisions say.
And also the additions that we put in there as far as refrigerators and so on.
Those were granted. So they were granted to the community as an economic development grant. So
Right,
this-
but
Before the community.
they were for
So
the
if they
community,
canceled the lease, it's no longer for the community.
right?
I would think we'd want that.
Yeah.
So I
Or-
So I think the options before us at this point are either approving the requested change or denying.
Right.
Because there, as you pointed out, council, there's any point in pushing it off.
Or
Right,
offer them something different, like you don't want the parking lot at all,
right,
and you will retain the lease on the building only.
okay. So that would be another option for us, is we give up that parking lot.
I mean, that's, I don't know,
That's a
that's probably
possibility.
the only other option you have.
It's sticky because the community thinks that's part of the building, and then we're running into every time there is something in the building and someone parks in the parking lot, they find that they've been towed, whatever.
That is
Bad.
true.
Maybe stick with lease as is.
Absolutely.
Further discussion?
I'm ready to vote.
So at this point, we can, I'll entertain a motion to either approve or deny. I mean, you can put forth the motion that you choose. What would be, I think what I'm hearing you say at this point, counselors, is that you would put forth the motion to deny the amendment to the May 2021 IOOF lease amendment.
Opposed to the recommended motion.
Right.
I will move to deny the amendment to the May 2021 IOOF lease agreement.
I second.
So we have a motion by Counselor Fox to deny and a second and a third. We have a second by Counselor Blaine. All those in favor? Opposed? Huh. The,
Passes unanimously.
passes unanimously, and the lease will not be amended at this point. Thank you, counselors.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I asked, what's gonna protect us in the future? To do this again, or not to, and not to.
I mean,
Because we do.
now that you've taken your action, but,
Yeah, do we need to-
Doesn't matter. right?
you know, if they came back, you know, there could be some negotiation of like, well, you want this amendment, let's put something in here that clarifies what's going on. I mean, you could enter into a negotiation that's clearer language in the lease.
Let's say they're fine with what we're proposing and not agreeing with. It's gonna stop them from cutting that electricity off next time.
They're gonna do it.
Please.
Yeah, then we would send them notice. I mean, we
Okay.
would send them notice now.
I think we should. I think you should start it. Because, and in front of a lawyer, the lawyer would ask me, I work a lot with lawyers, they would ask me, are you making the correct first steps? By not doing anything, I don't think I have. There's something for our record. Because if it happens again, then that is the second time. This one will be erased if we do nothing.
I mean, it's a notice that says this happened. You asked us to not allow this in the parking lot.
Yeah.
We cannot, we've explained we cannot do that. And if we allow someone in the parking lot, you cannot shut off the power.
Correct.
As long as
I
they're,
come back at them with a new lease saying you can't shut off the power on the parking lot.
well, that will be discussed at another time, but at this point, the motion to deny their request for an amendment has passed.
And is there direction to write basically a notice letter?
We need to move to.
Yes, please. We need to make a motion to that effect.
Yeah, I think it'd be cleaner.
Okay, I will entertain a motion that council should draft a letter to the IOOF management, I guess, for want of better word, about the violation lease on this past weekend.
I so move with that language.
Thank you.
Nice, second.
So you're fine with it going out without coming back?
You want it for review or? I think we're fine. Yeah.
Yeah, better trust you.
So,
Yeah, we totally trust you.
so
I'll
is there
check with
anyone
Ann.
opposed? Is there anyone opposed to having Ms. Davies write that letter? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, please
Aye.
raise your hands. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Who was the second on that? I'm so sorry.
I was.
Charter amendments.
This is just really an information only last chance for you to see the charter. So we did go over the changes at the last council meeting. I'm happy to step you through some of the changes, some of the bigger changes this council meeting. I did not receive too many comments. I think we received a couple questions regarding quorum. I know, and the staff are working with the city attorney to clarify a few places that we could provide a little bit more clarity, and that would come back in the final charter in the ordinance or the resolution. It will be a resolution on August 9th.
And then this will go to the voters also on the
Absolutely, yes.
November ballot.
For those counselors that were not here last time, we really realized that the amount of changes that were taking place were starting to be really cumbersome and hard to follow. So we actually decided that we would present a new charter that replaces the old charter. And we utilize the setup of the recommended charter by the League of Oregon Cities, and then we added all the Coburg-centric language in to make sure that it matched Coburg. So some of the pieces were the powers of the city, the office of the mayor, clarifying the office of the mayor, adding in the city administrator, and a little bit more language about the rest of the officers. We took the treasurer out because we don't have a treasurer. And one change that took place is to allow for the judge to appoint a pro tem himself. Because in the event that he has to choose somebody to show up at court to replace him, there isn't time for the council to appoint a pro tem judge. And so that made a lot of sense.
So that would be in case of illness or absence or
Yeah.
Inability to.
And if he can't do that, then it does come to the council to appoint a pro tem judge. But in an interim, short-term interim or something like that, that the judge does have the ability to appoint somebody. So those are some of the high points. We spent time cleaning up the vacancies in office and how vacancies are filled. The council asked that they have the final vote before vacating an office. You guys expressed that you really wanted to have that light before you vacated any office. And so that is in there. And so those are the kind of the high points of the changes that took place, but it is really a brand new document. And so if you have anything that you see, you go home and you read it tonight and you have something, send it to us soon because we're working on the final document and that's due this Friday. So for packets, and so we need to get the resolution ready and get it ready for final. So you would have just a day or so more if you have any questions on it.
And I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I ask some questions on the code section?
On the
On the code section?
code. Which section is that?
Well, are we talking about proposed to the charter?
Yes.
So on page 21, can we ask questions about the code sections? Because that'll be part of the overall proposed change, correct?
Clear on what you're talking about.
There's no 21 in the charter, so that's what I'm confused
I think
about.
I think
You're
he's
on
thinking
code.
of the code.
We're not discussing,
That's not part of this discussion?
no,
Not yet.
no,
Okay, all right,
that's
I'll wait.
actually a whole different agenda item.
We
Yes.
we
Okay.
will open that at 7.
Okay.
Counselor Lyman.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions about the charter? I think I sent you a question, Ann, about whether we were going to put some language in there about abstaining votes and that impact on the forum.
Those are kind of a few things that we're
Right.
just trying to tighten up.
I
before
figured this much,
we
and
come back with the final.
okay. I know that that had been a conversation at one of our former at our council meetings. I don't know, I may have to get up and sing or dance or something there. Thank you for all that work. That was, I think you've done a marvelous job with redoing that charter. It is much clearer in my. So, thank you.
It was a team effort.
Right.
Been a walk in the park.
Right. Nothing, redoing documents like that is a walk in the park. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we'll adjourn a little bit and for another
We can
5
take a
minutes.
5-minute break.
Yeah, I think we will. So special session of the city council is adjourned.
No,
No.
no, we're not adjourning the
Oh,
meeting.
Sorry, we're taking a recess.
5-minute recess. We'll be back
So,
at 7 o'clock.
Thank
hearing.
you. Dang, I
Same
want to
meeting,
use
it's the same
that
meeting.
gavel. We're reconvening the council meeting. 7 o'clock this evening, we will have a public hearing on ordinance number A-254, an ordinance amending Article 7C of the Coburg zoning
Can I stop
code.
you for a second? I'm
Yes.
sorry, you read the wrong ordinance number. It's 200L, so you could just back up
Oh,
and. I
Thank
think you were mixing the psilocybin one with the.
Okay. Yes, but that's okay. I can back up. We will be having the hearing on ordinance, yes, ordinance A 200-L, an ordinance amending Article 7C of the Coburg zoning code to implement a form-based code for the central business district and implementing other general housekeeping updates to the zoning code. City Council will hold the first reading and public hearing tonight. The second reading and recommendation, final decision upon ordinance, get over here, sorry, A 200-L, based on the complete record, including testimony received at tonight's public hearing, is another public hearing is scheduled for August 9th, 2022.
No, I'm
Sorry.
Can I correct you
I-
again? So the
Thank
second
you.
reading, that last sentence you just read is just saying that the second reading is gonna occur on August 9th. So
Right.
The public hearing is tonight. It's just that the testimony that you received tonight will be.
Included. Okay, so based on, anyway, I think we've got it clear now. Thank you. Trying to read from several scripts and this is, so we're good. We're good. This hearing will be held in accordance to the land use procedures required by the city and the state of Oregon. This is a type 7 legislative procedure. At the beginning of public hearing tonight, staff will identify the applicable substantive criteria from the city's comprehensive plan and or the state of Oregon statewide planning goals. For anyone wishing to speak, we are asking you that you use the sign-up sheet that has been provided. Interested persons will be recognized in the order in which their names appear on the speaker's list. We ask that each speaker limit themselves to no more than 5 minutes. And please remember that all presentations will be timed. You will be informed when your allotted time has expired. But we won't have a hook that drags you off. All speakers exceeding the time limit will be asked by the chair to immediately conclude his or her remarks. If you do not finish your presentation, be sure to provide a copy of your statement to the recorder. So written statements certainly are acceptable. A written statement testimony may also be offered and will be considered and made part of the record. So I'll now open the public hearing and hold the first reading at 7:05. On ordinance A 200-L, an ordinance amending Article 7C of the Coburg zoning code to implement a form-based code for the central business district and implementing other general housekeeping updates in the zoning code. Ding. Got to use the gavel, isn't that exciting? Thank you. And we now have a staff report, and that is from Ms. Winter.
Good evening. Before you tonight is the first reading of A 200L on the proposed zoning code amendments. First, I'm going to give a brief overview of the presentation this evening. I'll start giving just a brief background about these amendments. And then Zoe from the Urban Collaborative will be presenting on the form-based code. And then I will run through the matrix of the rest of the amendments, and then we can have further questions. So in 2020, the city contracted with the Urban Collaborative to conduct a build-out scenario analysis. The build-out project spurred discussion in the community about what was currently allowed in the zoning code. And from that discussion, City Council gave direction to create an ad hoc zoning code review committee. That committee consisted of 2 city councilors, 2 planning commissioners, 2 citizens at large, and 1 business owner. The committee met bi-weekly for over 8 months in 2021 and formulated recommendations on proposed amendments, including contracting with the Urban Collaborative to develop a form-based code for the Central Business District, as well as to prohibit formula-based businesses, which are also known as chain stores, within the Central Business District. Last Wednesday, on July 20th, a public hearing was held at Planning Commission, and Planning Commission moved to recommend approval to the City Council unanimously. However, there were concerns about the formula-based business restriction, which I'm going to discuss in a little more depth after Zoe presents on the form-based code.
Thank you.
So, good evening. Can you hear me and see?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me tonight, and thanks for giving some background, Megan. If it is all right, I'm going to share my screen, but I'll talk through everything as well. And of course, you have all of the code in front of you. Oh, no, I can't share my screen. That's all right.
I will make you co-host, so give me a second.
Okay.
I would just like to remind everybody that we're only talking about the Central Business District tonight when we look at this code amendment. No?
All right.
There's a few other things. Oh. Okay. All right.
So hopefully this works. Is that showing for everyone?
Yes.
Great. So this is just a visual aid. I'll talk through everything as well. Megan already gave some background. This is the Central Business District form-based code. So that's the only district that we're looking at. And it was, the catalyst was really because of some of the work that we had already done with Coburg, listening to the community, walking the community, and really understanding how Coburg wanted to grow. And it wasn't like the top picture. It was, the desire was that Main Street would look much more like the bottom picture there. This is your zoning districts. And then just the zoom in of the Central Business District is what is in pink there. And I just wanted to put the purpose here just to remind everyone, again, where this is all coming from. So this is directly from your existing code, and no one is proposing to change it. The Central Business District is intended to preserve and enhance the downtown area as the historic heart of the community. Coburg's downtown is the community's central location for commercial services, civic functions, and mixed use. And then it also goes into detail about being attractive and pedestrian oriented. And of course, reflecting the small town and historic character of Coburg. So that's really the vision behind looking at a form-based code overlay for the Central Business District. These are all the background documents. So the comprehensive plan, the vision statement, the development of code, of course, overlay districts, and then the build out scenarios. And what came out of all of that was we wanted to start with a vision, which Coburg has a wonderful vision and didn't change. And how to get there, we needed to create a regulating plan for the central business district, update some code language, which was what the ad hoc committee worked on, and then connect the building, street, and landscape standards to that vision to make sure that it becomes the heart of Coburg that is reflective of your historic character and pedestrian oriented. So this is the result. This is the regulating plan. This is going to be an overlay zone. So it would go on top of the central business district and just shows two different parcel types, very simple. A downtown core, so that's really looking at where we want to incentivize what we consider the type of development that Coburg wants on its main street, and then downtown flex, which is kind of the rest of the central business district, and where we want to incentivize, obviously, the type of development Coburg wants to see, but just a little bit less dense. And I won't go through the entire overlay, but I did want to just give some background. A lot of what's in the current code stayed the same. So we didn't change, the lot size. We didn't change the lot coverage, things like that. So a lot of this is taken from your code and just put into a form-based standard. And then what we did do is update that to really reflect anything that would affect the public realm and just make sure that was reflecting what the city of Coburg wanted. So this is the downtown core building standards. So this would affect what was in that kind of red color. And then the second page is a few extra notes. The downtown flex building standards, it reflects the regulations that would be on the kind of more yellowy orange color. And they're very, very similar. The downtown flex building standards are just a little bit more flexible. So that's really the difference, is that they allow for a little bit less density because that kind of tiers it down into the residential areas that are surrounding the central business district. So this is some language that is referred to already in the code, but just talks about the architecturally controlled areas. So that's the nod to your historic district and making sure that buildings adhere to that, making sure that's documented in this overlay. And then shop front design standards just talk about really what we want our main street public realm to look like. So that doesn't affect anything beyond the front of the buildings on the main street, only where that's designated. And really it's reflective of what's already there, but just making sure that any new development would also be pedestrian oriented. So what does that mean? It means that we want to have lots of windows. We don't want to have just blank wall space. We want to have kind of pedestrian amenities. So maybe a covered awning or nice landscaping, things like that. And then the image to your right is just a kind of a before and after, very conceptual rendering of what it might be like if this code were implemented. So this is a conceptual rendering looking north at the corner of Mill Street and North Harrison. And, the current state is perfect. It's just fine the way that it is. It's a one-story residential building on the corner facing Pavilion Park, or Pfeiffer Park, sorry. And the picture above is just what could happen to that corner if someone were to develop on it within the boundaries of this code. So it's just trying to reflect the types of development that would be allowed under this overlay zone. So this was just another example I wanted to walk people through to give you an idea. This is what North Willamette Street looks like, looking south. There you see City Hall, where many of you are. And then, there's the potential that something like this could be built within the code. Or this, lots of windows. You'd probably put some tables out there or something. Or this. So it's not restricting the architecture significantly, but definitely where the building comes and meets the public realm. So the buildings need to be built to the street, not setbacks and with a parking lot in front. And they should have some pedestrian amenities and clear kind of fenestration or windows along their front. So that was kind of the task, and it's what the ad hoc committee really accomplished. We started with the vision that the Coburg community wanted and was already there. And we used that to create the regulating plan, update the code language, create the form-based code overlay, and then connect the buildings and streets and landscape to that vision. So that is the end. What I didn't show is a couple other pages that are included and that I won't bore you all with right now, but we also did update some landscape standards for the central business district. So you can see that in the updated code. And the landscape standards include some parking lot standards. So just making sure that there's enough stormwater drainage and things like that, according to the engineering design guidelines. All right. Any questions for me right off the bat, or any desire for further elaboration?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Counselor Lyman, sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I have a question on page 23.
So the overlay zone only goes to page 18, so I'm not sure I'm looking at the same document.
Okay, at the top right, it says page 4, item 2.
Oh, okay.
It's section 4B 2.
Got it. So you're in the matrix?
Yes.
Okay.
So it says that no more than 30% of the front yard area shall be pavement. That's the current code language. And under the proposed amendment, what I'm concerned is that the way the language is, that this could permit the building or the property to have no quote unquote front yard area, but instead 100% driveway. And I don't think that's what the intent is. So currently we say that no more than 30% of the front yard shall be pavement. But the way I read this, I could interpret to say that because the driveway area is not included in that calculation, a developer may say, I'm going to have the whole front yard area as driveway, which would be all pavement. So I'm just wondering if there can be a clarification in that gets at our goal where we really want to have landscaping, and we really don't want to have more than 30% of the front yard in pavement, but now yet we're saying we're going to exclude the calculation to have driveways included in that calculation. So something to think about in further discussion, but the way I read it, it kind of makes it says, it says no more than 30% of the front yard area shall be pavement, but the driveway area is not included in that calculation. So what if a developer says, we're just going to have 100% driveway in the front of our building?
Thank you for that, Councilor Lehman. That is an additional proposed amendment that is not part of the form-based code overlay. So I'm happy to address that, but Zoe will not be aware of that change. The 30% maximum paved in the front yard, it's come to our attention that that is very difficult to meet on a 6,000 square foot lot with a 50-foot frontage, which is our lot requirements. And some developers have brought it to our attention that it is very difficult to install a 2-car width driveway and meet that 30% calculation, along with our setbacks for a 10 feet in the rear and 7 feet from the side yard. So it's kind of a matter of trying to make everything work together.
And I understand that. I just think that the language should be reflective of what you just said, because it still says that no more than 30% of the front yard area shall be pavement. And what you just said would kind of say, there's no way we're going to get to that calculation. when we include that the driveway is not included in the calculation. So I just think our wording needs to match with what we want the outcome to be.
I think we can probably make your comment and make it clearer what that means when we're saying it's not included in the code. Thank you, Councilor Lyman.
I have another one on the next page, 2B1. So the current language in the middle of
Counselor
that,
Lyman, just a minute, please. This was speaking. Megan's gonna go down through the matrix and go and touch on all the points in the matrix. So
Okay.
that might help you in your question. But, and then you can maybe ask about that specific thing. But
Okay.
she is gonna actually walk you through this. I think Zoe was focusing on the central business district only
okay.
at this point.
So this
Although
whole
that-
matrix is only for the central district, or that's what I thought I heard you
No,
say.
it is a combination, but Zoe was walking us through the central business district only. The matrix does touch on other things. You are correct. So I guess, are there any
I
other?
think it's questions for Zoe is where we're
Yes.
at right now, is if you have
Right.
specific questions for Zoe regarding the central business district form-based code that she presented.
So I will say, Counselor Lehman, that it happens that the 2.B.1 applies to the central business district. So I know that Megan's going to walk through those. But it would apply to the central business district. It's not part of the overlay zone per se, but it definitely would affect those same parcels. So I'm happy to hear the question.
So you want me to go forward with 2B1 or wait?
Yeah, just that one.
So in the middle of that paragraph, it says all garage entrances facing a street shall be recessed behind the front building elevation by a minimum of 4 feet. So that whole thing is stricken in the potential amendment. So by deleting that, what would the impact be? It seems like that would mean that there are no restrictions.
So I would agree with you. It's taking away the recess restriction for garages on mixed use buildings. And that recommendation came from the ad hoc committee. So I don't know if Kathy, you would like to address that. I see Kathy is on here. Or is that allowed to have other people?
Don't know.
Yes, we would certainly like to hear from Kathy. If she would.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I might just add that for these hearings, the format that I'm used to is the staff presentation followed by anybody in the public that wants to speak for or against it, including I was going to speak on behalf of the committee during that section. And then I believe after that's the public hearing portion. And then after that, the public hearing is closed. And then the council has the opportunity typically to
Kathy,
ask questions and discuss, but I'll just throw that out. But
Would you like to address Counselor Lehman's question since Zoe thought that perhaps you would, otherwise we'll put it back to the regular way that we do things.
right, yeah, I mean, I can address that now if you'd like, or I can hold off and address it during the discussion part of the public
Megan,
hearing.
do you have a preference in terms of, would you like to go ahead with your staff report and then we'll address the questions?
Maybe we'll just let Kathy address this one and then go ahead with the rest of the staff report and get
Okay.
back on.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I'm glad somebody brought that up about this. So we're in this particular case, we are talking about mixed use in the central business district. And So some of you may remember that in our residential zoning, we do require that garages are set back 5 feet from the front facade of the home. And that was a design standard that was put in on purpose by a community group, ad hoc committee similar to this one years ago. And I think it's a really great provision in our code for our residentially zoned lots. These are, your traditional lot that has a single family home and lots of yard space. And the idea there is to emphasize the homes and the front doors and the windows of the home, and to de-emphasize the garage, because there was a trend in development for a long time in the 90s where it seemed like you went through a residential district and all you started to see was just gigantic garages taking up the whole streetscape. And that was a problem that we identified. We didn't want to have that happening in Coburg. We wanted to encourage, residential designs that was a little bit more traditional and focused on people's homes and not have it look like a storage unit when you're driving down the street. So that's not what we're talking about here. This part is just for the central business district. And it is for mixed use, meaning like if you have sort of that new Coburg Inn where it has the apartments upstairs and then the downstairs is storefront. So it would be that type of building that we're talking about. And for some reason, I don't know why, a provision similar to the residential zone was at some point inserted into our central business district code, where it was trying to copy that idea, where it was saying, let's make sure the garage is set back from the front of the building. And I argued that for this district, I don't think that makes sense. What you'd be looking at would be, picture a 2-story building on a main street, your classic main street building. And then picture you have the top floor, and then suddenly you have 4 feet where you have pushed back, and then there's a garage door 4 feet back into the building. I argued that that does not make sense. I don't think that would be a nice look, for one. And it doesn't, I don't think the same kind of design standards are applicable for Main Street. This is supposed to be the part of our town that has more dense, development. I don't see any benefit to having that. I only see that as being a detriment to folks that want to develop those lots. So anyway, I was one of the very vocal people on our ad hoc committee that said, for this particular type of use on our main street, that code just doesn't make any sense to me. And a lot of other people on the committee agreed, and we voted to remove that section of the code for that reason.
So my question was, does that, by deleting the restriction to having no restriction, does it give the guidance to what the developer would be doing for a garage that faces a street in the mixed use section?
I can answer that. Sorry to put you on the spot, Kathy.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So yes, Councilor Lehman, there is guidance because the overlay zone calls for buildings to be built up to the street, and it gives a minimum and maximum setback, or in this case, it's called a build to line, because we want people to address the public realm. So you just can't have a bunch of blank space in front of your building that could accommodate a really long driveway or a big parking lot or something like that. So if there were to be a garage, it would need to be built to the same setback and build to standards as the rest of the building.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions? I have a comment about that. Can I comment?
I really think we need to get back on track
Okay.
of the hearing.
All
We're
right.
supposed to have the public hearing, And
We'll go forward.
and then discussion and could be having more discussion next.
Okay, thank you. So Megan, would you please go ahead with the staff report?
Yes, thank you. So Sammy's going to pull up on the screen as well as the document that you have in your hand, the revised matrix of proposed code amendments. The first page are basic housekeeping items, updating the title and the ordinance number. This is followed by a restriction on formula-based businesses within the central business district. The definition for formula-based businesses is the last change in this matrix, and so I'm going to recommend that we hold off that discussion until the end. That is removing the language that is being replaced with the form-based code within the central business district. That is followed by the addition of a rendering of possible development for the highway commercial district that was also done by the Urban Collaborative and is attachment C in your packet. The next amendment is adding beer and wine to an allowed use in the light industrial district. Next, in the campus industrial district, we have removed language that says manufacturing and assembling. The manufacturing and assembly will remain, but we will remove the part that says where the use does not require a permit from an air quality public agency. This change was recommended to us by the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency, also known as LARAPA, because it's actually moot since manufacturing has to obtain the appropriate air quality permits regardless. This proposed addition is a new section for public facilities, followed by the new section for the form-based code for the Coburg downtown. Next, looking at Article 8, supplementary district regulations. We are adding new standards for existing roadways to provide flexibility in street design development. Section on accessory dwelling units, the owner occupancy requirement is being removed. And that is common with jurisdictions now that are incentivizing or encouraging the use of accessory dwelling units to provide more housing. It's followed by reducing the minimum of a finished porch in the residential area from 16 to 13 inches as a minimum. This was also brought to our attention by developers who identified that it is more common to build a 6 or a 7-inch stair than to build an 8-foot stair. And so
8-inch there.
Thank you, 8-inch stair. And so that just kind of made a little more sense. The 30% front yard area shall be pavement that Councilor Lehman had brought up earlier. Followed by prohibiting the use of metal as a material on accessory structures over 200 square feet within the traditional residential zone. Next, we're looking at the mixed use section. There was already a provision in the mixed use section that allowed for a 10% increase in height if there would be residential provided along with a commercial use. So for a mixed use building, the current code allowed for 35 feet. And if it was going to be mixed use, then they had an allowance to build up to 45 feet. And so with the new overlay is proposing that 45 feet will be allowed across the board. And so this is restricting to a maximum of 45 feet. The next amendment is the garage entrance that Zoe and Councilor Lehman have also previously discussed. Ere we move on to the mobile food vending section. The recommended by Fire Chief Minter after reviewing our current code on mobile food vending. And this is just adding a few provisions that mobile food carts or food trucks would be set back a minimum of 5 feet from any structure, including other food trucks or awnings, that they must have a fire extinguisher and a certain level of propane, and also that they will comply with Oregon Fire Code as required. Advise that applying to install or place a mobile food truck would be a type 1 land use administrative approval. Next, looking at the special district section, Article 9 is a reference to the downtown Coburg overlay district, the form-based code that So just presented. It's followed by Article 10, types of review procedures. This is mostly a little housekeeping. There were some grammatical typos. And so it's specifying that type 1 food truck that I just mentioned. It is correcting that a final plat for a subdivision is a type 1. Updating the DLCD notice requirements. DLCD has changed their notice requirements from 45 to 35 days, and they also use an online system now instead of a paper mail copy. So updating the DLCD requirements. On site design review and the requirements for applying for a site design review, that will need to include the development checklist that was created by Urban Collaborative as part of the form-based code overlay. Is Article 12 on land divisions. And this is merely correcting a Scrivener's error in the current code. The section on partitions it appears to be copied and pasted. And so the word partition just needs to be corrected to subdivision. And there are 3 different instances where that takes place. Is the proposed definition for formula-based business, which I'll read out loud so that we all have an understanding. This is a business which is required by contractual or other arrangement to maintain one or more of the following items: standardized or formula array of services and or merchandise, trademark, logo, service mark, symbol, decor, architecture, layout, uniform, or similar standardized features, and in which causes it to be substantially identical to more than 5 other businesses, regardless of ownership or location. Formula businesses can include, but are not limited to, restaurants, retail stores, banks, real estate sale offices, spas, hair and nail salons, hotels, motels, inns, and bed and breakfasts.
Thank you, Megan. Are there any questions from the counselors or staff?
I just have a point of clarification. In the matrix, it references attachment D and E. And I think we only got C. The streets, additional street standards, and the public facilities.
You should have to receive those in your packet.
Are there any other questions from counselors? Counselor McConnell.
One is a note of clarification, that the formula-based businesses would be only in the downtown area, prohibited and not from the highway
Whatever that highway commercial.
Highway
or light,
commercial.
Yeah.
Yes, that
based
is
on
an
that.
important point, Counselor McConnell, that the prohibited use of formula-based businesses would only be within the central business district or the downtown corridor. That would not affect use out towards the highway.
And then one other point, the setback on the garage, that was not a unanimous. This is in the committee, right? For clarification as far as the garages.
If I recall correctly, just removing the recess was what the committee could agree upon for this round of updates. And the code review committee has requested to reevaluate garages on our Main Street and downtown corridor at a later time.
Any other questions for staff from counselors? Oh, Counselor Lehman. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so just a question on page 21 on accessory dwelling units.
Yes,
So our current code language or description includes accessory dwelling units, but the proposed amendment strikes all of that. So what's the reason or purpose for deleting 1E and 1F?
the purpose of that is to encourage more development of accessory dwelling units and provide additional housing options, diverse housing options within the community.
That's what I thought, but if we have current language describing it and we're deleting it, it kind of gives the impression that we're discouraging ADUs.
The current language that is being removed requires that either the occupant of the ADU or the primary dwelling be the owner of the property. And so this is removing that so that potentially both could be rented.
Okay, I just will need more clarification at some point in time on that, because that doesn't strike me that that is the outcome. When we have current language defining it and we're removing it all. So what replaces it?
You want me
This
to try to
seems-
address that? Yeah, so the matrix doesn't show the whole code. I always find it really helpful when I'm looking at code to see everything in context. And so when I have a matrix like this, and it's really helpful to pull out little pieces, but it doesn't give you the whole picture. And the whole picture in the code is that it says ADUs are allowed under these
Okay.
circumstances. All these limitations on
Okay,
ADUs. And so this occupancy limit is a limitation, and the temporary leave is that limitation and making it easier to build ADUs.
okay, that'd be helpful to know when you're presenting this to us, to say, we're not getting rid of it, we still have this covered in another area, but just looking at this, it seemed like that's the prevailing language that covers ADUs, so thanks for that clarification.
Councilor Lehman, you probably didn't have the option of reviewing the whole packet.
I don't have the
You're
whole
out of town.
code. I think Ann's referring to the entire code. Is that part of the packet here?
It is.
Okay,
It's the big thick part.
okay. The other thing I had a question on is this map here. And it shows this one area up here to be in red as not an open space, but it's currently not a city park, but I think Ann has referred to it as accessory or mini park. So is this potentially going to go away as development and not a park? You see where I'm
I can't
pointing
see
to?
where you're pointing.
Megan, he's referring to the green space to the north of the Dairy Mart.
Belongs to the Dairy Mart.
Oh,
Private property.
Yes, that is private property.
Okay, we're currently using it as a mini park.
Just out of the goodness of the property owner that they allow for people to use it as a mini park.
Okay.
They maintain it, we don't. There's a picnic table there, I think, and some benches, yeah. That answer your question, Counselor Lehman?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, we shouldn't take any more questions. We should go to the public
Okay.
hearing. and
All
then
right, so no more questions from counselors or staff. So we wish to hear from everyone who is interested in this proposal. Please remember to state your name and address for the record. And we will take the testimony in order of the speaker list or take testimony from proponents, opponents, and neutral commenters. And okay, so we're going to start with Kathy Engelbretson.
Okay, thank you. So I was asked to come as a member of the ad hoc Development Code Review Committee to just provide a
Kathy,
small presentation.
would you please give your address and?
Yes, sorry about that. Thank you. So it's Kathy.
It's a five minute.
Oh, okay. Sure. So it's Kathy Engelbretson, and it's 32703 East Locust Street. So yeah, I was asked to present on behalf of the ad hoc committee. So before I address, I didn't realize there was a time limit for this because I thought I was part of the, sort of like the applicant in a way. Our committee is presenting this to the public, but I will try to talk fast. So before I address some specifics, I think some background would be helpful. So, and for the benefit of members of the public that maybe aren't familiar with this type of thing, what we're talking about with the development code, or also known as the zoning code, this is the rule book that anyone developing land in Coburg must follow. It contains the specific regulations that must be met before a land use application can be approved. I would characterize the development code as the most critical land use planning tool the city of Coburg and its citizens have to ensure the built environment in our town continues to be a benefit and not a burden to the community. People don't just like Coburg, they love it. I believe a key reason is our street layout, neighborhood design, and overall built environment harkens back to a more traditional design than what became the norm almost everywhere else over the last 30 to 50 years. My feeling is, in order to preserve Coburg's treasured character, we as a city have work to do to upgrade our development code. With development pressures knocking on our door, I believe it's important to complete as much of these updates as possible as soon as possible. Some folks will look at our overall land use planning tools and say, gosh, for such a small town, you guys are ahead of the game. But I would counter that because due to our close proximity to a major metro area, we do not have the luxury that some small towns that are very remote have. This is such a highly desirable location to build that we need a very robust code. Good enough for a small town is just not going to cut it for Coburg. So meaningful and substantive code updates like these have been needed for a very long time, but they've been put off for decades because they require funding. Development code is technically complex and legally binding, and we cannot rely on volunteer community members for this. It does require highly experienced and qualified land use planning experts. In decades past, Coburg had to fund other priorities like the wastewater system, and so land use planning was put on the back burner. I'm excited to say with these recommended changes, we are finally on the road to fixing inadequate, outdated, and confusing code language so that our land use planning commissioners and staff have the tools they need to carry forward what's so great about Coburg into the future. Now, more specifically, we've already gone through some of this, but the recommended development code changes presented to the Planning Commission and now the City Council primarily pertain to Coburg's Central Business District, or in other words, Coburg's downtown, as well as tackling some low-hanging fruit in other districts. The Central Business District was chosen as the first to review due to extremely limited existing code that would allow virtually anything goes development to occur in the heart of our downtown. Recognizing this risk, the city did a public outreach in 2020 called the Build Out Scenario Project, and the ad hoc committee then used that as a jumping off point. After discussions spanning the last 2 years, the ad hoc committee is pleased to present the recommended code changes that we feel will make a substantial improvement to our rules for downtown development. These rules strike a good balance between requiring a classic Main Street look and feel, while also not going overboard with so much regulation that it would frustrate or discourage development. In closing, these changes have been a long time coming, and I believe they will be very beneficial for Coburg. And I encourage city councilors to vote in favor when the time comes, when you're ready to vote, vote in favor of the recommended development code updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have Ryan Hudman, sorry.
Right.
If,
I'm a little. Say my name and address.
yes,
Yeah.
please state your name and address.
Ryan Hudman, 32589 Hatfield Street. I'm a little underprepared because I just got word of this 3 days ago. And I'm just looking at the formula-based business, which I think is probably the big key thing here. And while I'm all in favor of majority of that, I think it does hamstring people that want to be entrepreneurs and people that want to do a small business out here, because some of those places can give you a hook to bring people out. I don't think a Dollar Tree is the right one, but I think like Ace Hardware is an example. If you look at a few of those around town, locally owned, great opportunity for job markets for people here that can draw people into the commercial area, that could draw them into the smaller storefronts and provide that. And some restaurants could fall into that as well. So I don't know if there's any way to make that a little less intrusive, but I just would like to start with that. And yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce and Robert Lamont. I should say, or whichever.
I'm Robert Lamont, and that's Bruce, my brother there. I live in Newburgh, Oregon, on Bald Peak Road. We own this big section of ground right here beside City Hall. We understand what Coburg's trying to do with the street front and stuff. Our objection is to putting the whole big section of ground into the most restrictive zone. I mean, you could put the front section here for building on the street zone and put the setback section here into more flex use or something, so that you could have a little bit of something back here for more business to come in to help. And, you know, we find out about this kind of through nobody comes to say, hey, we're going to restrict your land, you know. So I'm all for it. I mean, we own more land in Coburg than just this here too. And so we're all for the development and for bringing Coburg into the future more to what you want to see. I'm also a land developer, and I don't want my hands tied and making it the code restrictions on the formula-based businesses for the whole 3.1 acres or whatever here is too restrictive in my thought. And we'd like to see some kind of modification to that map to where maybe the street section here that's fits the formula-based businesses. But like Mr. Hudman said, maybe if an Ace Hardware, I don't know what the future would in the back corner here where people could come to it and it would help draw stuff to the businesses here. But I think it's drawn, it's tying the hands for development on the whole property. So.
Thank you, Mr. Lamont. Do the counselors have any questions for, oh, I'm so sorry.
Hello, I'm Bruce Lamont, and like my brother said, we own this property next door, which is basically what this pot shot's all about. Really talking about any place else in town except our property. And I am totally opposed to this formula-based business language. Like they said, you need a hook. You need a business that has name recognition to bring people into your area. You know, Mom and Pop's Pottery Store, that there's only one of, that's great. Except that's not gonna bring people in. They might shop there after they're here, but that's not gonna bring them in. And so whether you have a hardware store, whether you have some small name restaurant or something like that, that's what you need, something like that to get people to stop. And you can't put it all out at the freeway. You've already started to develop things like that out of the freeway, and a lot of others are, excuse me, aren't coming in there. But you know, being around Coburg since 1966, you know, we've seen a lot of changes over the years, and you know, this little farming community has changed, and we want to see the right kind of growth. I mean, if we want a Dollar General, they've tried to buy our property from us 4 different times, and every time we've told them to go away, we're not interested in talking to you because we're not interested in you, and neither is the town. And so I think it needs to be known that, you know, whoever develops that property is going to be responsible. You know, for the last 50 years, all I've heard is Coburg wants to be sisters, and Coburg should be Coburg. There's already a sisters. And so I just want to go on record as saying that I'm totally against this.
I need to back up and ask counselors if they have any questions for any of the speakers, and to please identify which speaker they have questions for. Oh, sorry, Counselor Lehman, I don't hear you, and I apologize.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I certainly can.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. I was wondering why that whole 3+ acres is all in one zone without some consideration for the back area being different than the front area. If different development could be in the back portion that wouldn't have to conform to the street front requirements.
Are you addressing this question to one of
To staff,
ones?
no, to staff who developed
No, this is for questions for the speakers.
oh, okay. I guess I don't have a question to that other than what I stated.
That's fine. I'm the one that brought that up. That's why I stood back up.
Okay.
You know, there's got to be some flex here in order to be able to make the whole thing work for the city the best way, rather than just hands behind my back and say, like it or lump it. You know? So I'd like to see some kind of a additional change there. We want what's good for the city. We really do. Like my brother said, Dollar General has contacted us every year for the last 4 or 5 years. Told them to pound sand. We're not going to allow that to happen. So we want to see something nice going to Coburg. We want to see Coburg grow. We want to see it be a nice city. You know, it's really coming along nice, but don't tie my hands behind my back where I can't do something nice for the city either. I've been a builder for 47 years. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions from council? Any of our speakers? Other speakers? If not, we'll close the public hearing, and I think I get to use the gavel. Hey, it is time, is 8 o'clock. Yes, thank you, Dr. Counselor Fox. Okay, now, council discussion.
Yeah, and it's okay for you to ask staff questions during this council discussion.
Thank you. Oh, Counselor McConnell.
So I guess this would come back to the committee and to staff. I totally hear you. I am so opposed to a Dollar General type store. But I am wondering if there is something we can do to modify the formula code for our community that says that would eliminate a large formula business that has 200 locations and would be restrictive, but still address Ms. Chandler's concern. Because I do hear you, but I am just so very strongly opposed to the large chains.
Thank you, counselors. Yes, after anticipating some concerns after the planning commission meeting, staff has done some research and prepared some alternate language about what it would look like to have a formula-based business as a conditional use instead of a prohibited use. And so within the central business district and any zoning district, there are 3 different types of uses. There are outright allowed permitted uses, there are conditional uses, and then there are prohibited uses. So staff has drafted some basic language just to introduce and ask for further direction for the next reading. That would include setting a square limit so that a formula-based business of less than 2,000 square feet could be reviewed as a conditional use, while keeping a larger, perhaps bigger box store in the prohibited use section.
Megan, I just might make a point is we put a square footage in there to show that a square footage would be an option, not that 2,000
Yes.
is the square footage.
Okay.
That would be an option that you could decide. How big do you want the option to be? Don't get hooked up on our square footage.
Yes, thank you,
That's a
Anne.
placeholder sort of at this
Placeholder.
point.
Thank you, Anne. Yes, and then further, staff had developed some criteria for the conditional use permit process that would apply only to formula-based establishments. Those are on the screen now. I can read them aloud. The first one, the availability of other uses similar within the district and within the vicinity of the proposed project. The form-based establishment will contribute to the small business and entrepreneurial environment. Proposed use, together with its design and improvement, is consistent with the unique historic character of Coburg and would preserve the distinctive visual appearance and shopping experience of Coburg for its residents and visitors. 4, the formula-based establishment will serve an appropriate balance and be mutually beneficial to surrounding businesses by contributing to the economic health of the whole district. And vacancy rates within the district and within the vicinity of the proposed project.
What's that last one mean?
Empty storefront downtown corridor.
I think that's if suddenly we had a downturn and all the stores are empty. That there's some options allowed to fill some storefronts if need be.
Under the conditional use.
Under the conditional.
Question, Megan?
Yes,
So the
ahead.
conditional use amendments or changes, is that included in our packet or is that not provided to us?
that is not provided to you other than the language you see on the screen as part of the presentation. This was very last minute, anticipating that staff may want to present an alternative to the outright ban of formula-based businesses.
responsibility for this. I had some concerns. I talked with some people who were really concerned about this an out and out ban. And I talked with the city attorney and planning and said, you know, we're doing a really important piece of work here in Coburg that everybody wants to get it done. And I hate to get to a point where we have one instance, one thing that's going to hold this whole process up when staff could come forward with an alternative voice. That if this is the sticking point, perhaps we can introduce an idea that could keep it moving, but allow for the council to give some thought to this point that is obviously becoming a sticky point. And so we did quite a bit of research. We read a lot of different codes in other cities, how other cities were handling it. And we looked at legal battles that small cities had had with form-based code type. And there are some. We didn't find any in Oregon because Oregon is one of the states that has comprehensive plans. So our comprehensive plan speaks very clearly to what Coburg wants to be. Very clearly, we are a historic district. We clearly want our culture honored in what goes into our downtown. And so our code supports that. And so allowing for conditional use takes all of the strength of our comprehensive plan and allows for it to be utilized when you're considering who you will allow in your downtown. And so that is why I was like, let's try to introduce an option if this becomes a big sticking point. I did reach out to the ad hoc committee and said, what would you think if the staff were to do this? And we did get responses back that said, yes, I understand why this could be important. They wanted it well written. They wanted it reviewed by legal and by LCOG planning, and which we did do. We had quite a bit of discussion on it. But there was a genuine agreement that if this becomes a sticky, yes, please provide some alternative language to make this process a little bit less cumbersome. So I take full blame for introducing this because I wanted to alleviate a really hard process on one sticking point.
I'd just like to say, I won't allow you to take blame. I think that this is a very reasonable thought that we need to sort of take a look at. Councilor McConnell?
I'm on that ad hoc committee and I did not get that information. So this is.
You're not getting any.
I was not getting anything. I am now getting it, but there was a couple of weeks where I was definitely not getting anything at all. And so this is kind of coming up new to me. And I'm fully in favor of looking at some alternatives. And I did a lot of research about the formula-based business that I'm adamant about and how negatively it can impact a community. It can impact their health. It can impact their financial, any place that has that formula-based community, they see increased obesity, increased diabetes, increased poverty. It's enough for me to get up and stamp my feet. So I'm glad there's an alternative. And I'm sorry I didn't. No, I feel. a little bad.
The Fox.
2 points. One, although there is one concept being shared of formula-based, there are many formula-based, and part of the discussion was get some of the formula out of the formula. How they contributed to the community. So that if we even look at this conditional use, you said who, and I would also add how, so that if you pulled up to a Starbucks, it wouldn't look like a Starbucks. It would look like something that's in Coburg, not the formula-based Starbucks. That's what some of the intense discussions we had was around, is that if there was gonna be that even if something was desirable, they would morph their whole thing, or Ace Hardware wouldn't have this placard up. So that's one point. So it's not only who, but it's how they, and I've seen that happen where they blend in. You can't tell that you're in. The other thing is, it was brought up earlier, totally separate, about the flex use versus the more restrictive town area. But the formula-based businesses were. So that's a separate discussion of whether or not to parcel off the back half of this thing as to the Pullman brand reflection. But the formula-based businesses additionally out from that.
Counselor Lehman? Do you have anything to add?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, council has no more discussion points. And I want to thank all of our presenters for coming tonight and sharing your views, and we take those very seriously. We will have council will hold a second reading of the information of this proposal on August 9th. And that will be at 7 o'clock, I believe, regular council meeting. I do have one question. Can I ask Mr. Marshall? From your planning commission role, did you get any input on the change in height requirement or, okay. That was something that did come up at planning commission, and I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. So if the station, then we'll.
So staff does need to bring back a final ordinance.
Okay.
And a final, so council can give staff direction to bring back the alternative language into the code. You can we do both languages and they can choose at the final?
You can, it's not, I mean, if, I can't really tell whether council's leaning one way or the other, but if you have a little bit more clear discussion and it looks like everyone is like, yeah, let's go with this alternative, then you can prepare it that way.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Oh, Counselor Lehman, sorry.
Muted.
We can't hear you, Counselor.
So if we come back on August 9th with a different ordinance that has conditional use and some other language, would that be a first reading of that ordinance?
I'm going to defer to
That's an
council.
excellent question.
I think that
It would be my interpretation, it would be.
you can make changes in an ordinance, so I think we were of the opinion that you possibly could do just a second reading and pass it with those changes. I'm not sure what the time crunch is, if there is any. The safer route would be to have a third reading.
Yeah, it would be a significant change that I think would require a second reading of the proposed ordinance with the conditional use.
Right, right.
I think it's.
I mean, this is an important, very important, like it was said earlier, it's one of the most important decisions we're going to be making.
Thank
And
you.
to try to do that in another one meeting with this, not even reviewing it probably for another week or two.
Thank you. Question. Yes.
I also have some, I need some clarification on the garage thing. Because I can't envision why there would be a garage in a business on Main Street. And so I'm just kind of stuck there.
Megan, would you like to address that, or is that why you were coming to the podium?
Couldn't there be a townhome with a business next to it and the entrance to the townhome is a garage that have a staircase inside the garage, something like that?
In that case, it needs to have a setback.
No, it's not.
It doesn't make sense.
Okay, so staff needs direction in terms of whether we as council want them to bring back the proposed code amendments with the conditional use. Yes. Oh,
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
I did want to clarify one point about the lot next door. Counselor Lehman had raised that perhaps some different things should be allowed on the back of the lot. And I just wanted to clarify that the zoning on the lot next door is not changing. It is currently Central Business District. It will remain Central Business District. It is the downtown core parcel type. But the main difference between the parcel types is that the downtown flex parcel type just allows for a little bit for more residential development. And so I just wanted to clarify that there is not restriction happening to the lot, to the building standards on the lot next door.
So are you saying that that has always been zoned as Central Business District? Zoning is not changing.
That's correct.
Okay, what we're doing is putting some better guidance with that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, but what I heard from the testimony or the comments made was what we were doing for the street front was affecting the whole 3.1 acres. And the question was, why is it affecting the interior back portion when it appeared like the intent was to affect the storefront or the street front property?
Promoting how the street front interacts with the public realm is a big part of the form-based code, but it includes all of the other building standards that are typically presented within the zoning district regulations. So that includes height, architectural detail, historic features that need to be included, such as window types, different design standards that are part of the district, whether or not it's on Main Street or not.
So there could
Have
be
not
businesses.
changed greatly with the proposed amendments.
Okay, so the comment was that their hands were being tied as to what they could do with the rest of their property. I guess that was the misunderstanding or clarification I was wanting to hear more about.
Yes, so it's my opinion that this is not restricting the building development that can happen. If anything, it may be allowing for more intense and dense development to take place on the lot next door. And I'm speaking just to the form-based code overlay that deals with the design standards, not the formula-based business restriction. But I just wanted to point out that is not changing or being restricted with these proposed amendments.
Well, I would agree with what was said earlier. This is a very complex issue and a very important issue. And I would feel rushed to try to make a decision by August 9th, especially if we're going to be amending the ordinance to have conditional use provisions added.
I think we have agreed that the August 9th will sort of be the first reading again as we look at the proposals that have been put forth. So again, from counselors, do we have a recommendation to staff to move forward with the conditional use language?
If
council are going to have another first reading on August 9th, then you should reopen the public hearing on August 9th to
Okay.
allow, because we are changing the code
Mhm.
as suggested and adding the conditional use, and you're gonna want to give the public the chance to come in and give comment about that conditional use language.
So we will not only be doing the first reading, we will be reopening the public comment section on August 9th.
We have plenty of time to make that available, right? Between now and August 9th.
Yes.
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 Reopen it by stating.
So we will reopen the public hearing on August 9th. 7. Right. Okay. So direction from council to staff is to go ahead and make the conditional use changes to the code amendments. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anything else? If not, we will adjourn this meeting at, let's see, is it 8:20, 8:19? Thank you all. We appreciated everybody's input. Gavel. Oh, gavel. Yay. Have such